Gangamayi Yamuna ki jai. Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaura Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru Sri Gauranga. All glories to Sri the Prabhupada.
Hare
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all
Hare
again
Krishna,
for
Prabhu.
joining.
Is
We
that
can-
my humble obeisance? All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada. It's always lovely to see your smiling face, Mataji. So we continue our study of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are in the third canto, and today we're going to finish the second chapter. We're moving right along. I'm always very encouraged when we meet these milestones because we've been doing this for many years, and to see a steady devotees learning about Bhagavatam and relishing the pastimes, it always warms my heart. So it's nice to see that we're making our way through. So we will cover verses 31 through 34 and then finish up this chapter today. So here's 30. So what we'll do is we'll chant 31 together and then I'll do the rest separately. Vipannan Vishapanena Nigrihya Bhujagadhipam Uttapya Payadgavas Tattoyam Akrtishtitam Vipannan Vishapanena Nigrihya Bhujagadhipam Uttapya Payadgavas Tattoyam Prakrtishtitam Vipannan Vishapanena Nigrihya Bhujagadhipam Uttapyapayadgavas Tattoyam Prakrtishtitam. Please chant.
Vipannan Vishapanena Nigrahya Bhujagadhipam Uttyapyapayadgavas Tattoyam Prakriti Sthitam. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Vipapan Vishwapanena Nikraya Bhujadikam Uttapaya Payayat Gavas Tattoyam Prakriti Sthitam. Hare Krishna.
Anyone else? Okay. Vipannan, perplexed in great difficulties. Vishapanena, by drinking poison. Nigrihya, subduing. Bhujaga adhipam, the chief of the reptiles. Uttapya, after coming out. Apayayat, caused to drink. Gavaha, the cows. Tat, that. Toyam, water. prakriti, natural. Stitam, situated. Translation by Abhay Charnaravind Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The inhabitants of Vrindavan were perplexed by great difficulties because a certain portion of the Yamuna was poisoned by the chief of the reptiles, Alia. The Lord chastised the snake king within the water and drove him away. And after coming out of the river, he caused the cows to drink the water and proved that the water was again in its natural state. Text 32. Aya Jayad Go Savena Goparajam Dvijotamahai Vitasya Choru Parasya Chakir Shansad Vyayam Vibhu. Translation. The Supreme Lord Krishna desired to utilize the opulent financial strength of Maharaj Nanda for worship of the cows. And he also wanted to give a lesson to Indra, the king of heaven. Thus, he advised his father to perform worship of Go, or the pasturing land, and the cows, with the help of learned Brahmanas. Purport. Since he is the teacher of everyone, the Lord also taught his father, Nanda Maharaj. Nanda Maharaj was a well-to-do landholder and owner of many cows. And, as was the custom, he used to perform yearly worship of Indra, the king of heaven, with great opulence. This worship of demigods by the general populace is also advised in the Vedic literature, just so people can accept the superior power of the Lord. The demigods are servants of the Lord, deputed to look after the management of various activities and of universal affairs. Therefore, it is advised in the Vedic scriptures that one should perform yajnas to appease the demigods. But one who is devoted to the Supreme Lord has no need to appease the demigods. Worship of the demigods by common people is an arrangement for acknowledging the supremacy of the Supreme Lord, but it is not necessary. Such appeasement is generally recommended for material gains only. As we have already discussed in the second canto of this literature, one who admits the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not need to worship the secondary demigods. Sometimes, being worshipped and adored by less intelligent living beings, the demigods become puffed up with power and forget the supremacy of the Lord. This happened when Lord Krishna was present in the universe, and thus the Lord wanted to give a lesson to the king of heaven, Indra. He therefore asked Maharaj Nanda to stop the sacrifice offered to Indra and to use the money properly by performing a ceremony worshiping the cows and the pasturing ground on the hill of Govardhan. By this act, Lord Krishna taught human society, as he has instructed in the Bhagavad Gita also, that one should worship the Supreme Lord by all acts and by all their results. That will bring about the desired success. The Vaishyas are specifically advised to give protection to the cows and their pasturing ground or agricultural land instead of squandering their hard-earned money. That will satisfy the Lord. The perfection of one's occupational duty, whether in the sphere of duty to oneself one's community, or one's nation is judged by the degree to which the Lord is satisfied. I'm going to read that sentence one more time. The perfection of one's occupational duty, whether in the sphere of duty to oneself, one's community, or one's nation, is judged by the degree to which the Lord is satisfied. Text 33. Varshati nedre raja kopad bhagnam mane tvi ti vihvalaha. Tough one. Gotra lila patrena prato bhadranu grinataha. Sorry. Translation. O sober Vidura, King Indra, his honor having been insulted, poured water incessantly on Vrindavan, and thus the inhabitants of Raj, the land of cows, were greatly distressed. But the compassionate Lord Krishna saved them from danger with his pastime umbrella, the Govardhan hill. Text 34. Sharach chashi karer mrishtam manayan rajani mukham gayan kala padam reme strinam mandala mandanaha. In the third season of the year, the Lord enjoyed as the central beauty of the assembly of women by attracting them with his pleasing songs in an autumn night brightened by moonshine. Purport. Before leaving the land of cows, Vrindavan, the Lord pleased his young girlfriends, the transcendental gopis, in his Rasa Leela pastimes. Here, Uddhava stopped his description of the Lord's activities. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, second chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Remembrance of Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminati Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pacharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatane Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, again, we wrapped up this chapter. Uddhava, after explaining how Krishna interacts with both those who are favorable towards him and those who are unfavorable towards him, and how it's impossible to not fall in love with him once understanding his true nature, how once having attained that love, one cannot tolerate even a moment of separation from him. After explaining all of that, Uddhava has now been recalling Krishna's sweet pastimes in Vrindavan. And today we are fortunate to hear him mention 3 of them. So the first thing I want to do is mention what these pastimes have in common, actually have something in common, and what they mean to us, we aspiring devotees. Aside from, also, of course, being able to just appreciate the pastimes and the character of Sri Krishna, there's also something that we can learn from it and apply to help us reach our ultimate goal. And then after we do that, after we talk about what these verses have in common, then I would like to share some of my favorite aspects of these particular pastimes, which is always fun to do. So, the pastime of Kaliya illustrates how Krishna reciprocally interacts with different types of individuals, right? So he was happy to sport in the water and wrestle with the huge multi-headed serpent. He was even happy to pretend that it not only was a challenge for him, but he was happy to let Kaliya actually think that he had a chance of overcoming or overpowering the Supreme Lord. And that actually should sound familiar to us because we too, unfortunately, are trying to overcome the power of the Supreme Lord by acting as if independent from him here in this material world. And as he's allowing Kaliya to entertain that illusion, he's also allowing us to think that there's actually a chance that it's possible to overpower the Supreme Lord, to become independent controllers and enjoyers. But back to the pastime with Kaliya, although he's playing with Kaliya and allowing him to think he's in control, when Krishna noticed that his pure devotees were becoming far too disturbed by the shenanigans that were going on, meaning to the point of death, not just that they were upset, they were actually losing their life on the bank of the Yamuna. Balaram was holding them back from going in to try to help because, of course, Lord Balaram, he knows what's going on. He has no doubts whatsoever. And it's not that the other residents had doubts, it's just that they had fear because Krishna is their very life, their prananath. And to even contemplate that Krishna could be in some sort of danger caused so much distress that these residents of Vrindavan were actually losing their lives because in their eyes, if there's no Krishna, there's no life. Plain and simple. That's their level of dedication and devotion and love to Krishna. So when Krishna sees that his devotees are actually, literally dying on the bank of the Yamuna, then he started his very beautiful dance on the Kaliya serpents' heads to relieve them of their distress. Right? So that's the first pastime. Then we heard about Govardhan Lila and the Lord's pastime umbrella. I like how that's worded in there. Sometimes when we're children, walking through the woods, we find a stick that just happens to have two other branches coming off of it, and it looks just like a sword. And when we're children, we get very excited by finding such a perfect stick, and we can play sword fights, and we're trying to overcome the enemy of the wheat fields, with our trusty sword, right? But Krishna, to him, his toys are mountains, right? That's his pastime umbrella. He picks up this huge mountain with his left pinky and shelters all of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, all the cows, everyone, from torrential downpours sent by Indra, who was upset that he didn't get what he was expecting, right? So the Lord's pastime umbrella. So again, this pastime is about Krishna acting with different types of individuals. So before Kaliya, he was dealing with this creature who was, honestly, he was just unconscious about his lifestyle, right? And he didn't care. He's causing so many problems, right? And how Krishna dealt with him and how Krishna also dealt with his pure devotees. And then here in Govardhan Lila, now we're hearing about how Krishna is dealing with one particular devotee and then also his pure devotee. So this one actually, it might hit closer to home, right? Because this isn't about a demon in Krishna and his devotees. It's about an aspiring devotee, a quite advanced one at that. It's worth mentioning here that in order to become Indra's a post, right? A person occupies the post. So in order to become the king of heaven, one has to be a very good devotee, right? It's not just that I mean, sometimes when we talk about the demigods, especially Indra, it can be frustrating because Indra from time to time makes a bad decision. And those are the ones that we read about, of course, because there are lessons to be learned. Most of the time, Indra's doing quite well in his service. Occasionally, he makes a mistake, and then that mistake, of course, in order for us to learn from his mistake, we study those pastimes. But make no mistake about it, in order to just get that post, to be trusted by Krishna with this very important responsibility, not only was he pious, but he was also a devotee, right? This is, so this Govardhan Lila, it's about an aspiring devotee, a quite advanced one again, who got distracted and forgot the ultimate purpose of his service. He knows he's doing service. Anytime he's in trouble, he turns to Vishnu. But sometimes he gets distracted. Sometimes the devatas get distracted by all the material opulence, and they get tied up or caught up in the enjoyment, and they become distracted and they forget what the ultimate goal is. So we see that even while performing service, as Indra does, we can lose sight of the true goal, the prayojana. And when that happens, if we are fortunate, Krishna will ever so kindly defeat our pride, and we will accept his merciful lesson. Hopefully, we won't fight against it. We'll offer suitable prayers, and we will become better devotees. Right? Hopefully. And then finally, today, we read about the Rasa Lila. In this interaction, it's just Krishna and his pure devotees, right? But it is important to note that even in this situation with Krishna and his pure devotees, a small trace of pride caused Krishna to vanish from the scene, right? And thus these pure devotees frantically had to search for Krishna with intense attachment and love so that they can become reunited with him. So all of these pastimes are about how Krishna is interacting with his different, not just the devotees, but different types of individuals, we'll say. So the Kaliya pastime, it gives us hope that even if we are being a disturbance, a huge disturbance, there's still a chance to rectify that. Govardhan Lila teaches us that while engaging in devotional service in a distracted way, even if we become distracted, there is still hope that the Lord, by his mercy, will correct our behavior and will help get us back on track. And the Rasa Lila shows us that any amount of distress is welcome if it increases our desire to associate with Krishna, right? Because this temporary separation from Krishna, it made the gopis hanker even more for what they wanted. And so they were able to then enjoy even more when they were finally reunited. So the Rasa Lila shows us that any amount of distress is welcome if it increases our desire to associate with Krishna. So all of these pastimes also included Krishna's interaction with his pure devotees, right? So the Kaliya, he was playing with Kaliya, but then he saw that devotees were distressed, so then he went. And with Govardhan, Krishna is instructing his pure devotees to act in the ultimate way that we're meant to act anyway, right? It's Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport that the Vedas, which of all the Vedas I am to be known, Krishna says this, Vedaischa sarvamaham eva vedyo. So the Vedas, which are guiding people to understand Krishna, to know Krishna, sometimes recommends worship of the demigods. And Srila Prabhupada mentions that this is because if we're at least offering sacrifices to the devatas, the demigods, then we're at least giving up our sense of control and recognizing that there's a higher system that's going on, that's in control, higher entity or entities, right? And so it's a gradual way to let go of our selfishness and understand that there is something going on that's greater than us, right? To let go of the reins a bit. And Srila Prabhupada also mentioned that most people that are inclined to worship the devatas, they do so because they want some material benefit, right? They're not doing it because it's the right thing to do necessarily. They're doing it because of material benefit. But since the Vedas, which recommend the worship of the devatas, and since it's there mentioned in the Vedas, it's obviously designed so that we can gradually accept Krishna, right? So if we already accept Krishna, then as Srila Prabhupada mentioned, there's no need for us to worship the devatas. Now, if instead of approaching the devatas when we have difficulties, and instead of approaching Krishna directly, we approach, experts in the field of technology or whatever, then we'd be better off actually approaching the demigods, because we're approaching lesser beings in that sense. So depending on where our consciousness is, it could be absolutely unnecessary to worship the devatas, or it could be absolutely necessary, depending on where our state of mind is. But for we aspiring devotees that understand, okay, no, we approach Krishna directly, then we approach Krishna directly. But we definitely don't just approach unauthorized individuals for anything. It always has to be Krishna. We always have to either approach Krishna or approach him through his transparent via medium. So they all show, all of these pastimes, all three of them show that Krishna is always ready to do anything in order to protect and satisfy these pure devotees, right? So he's willing to, break the laws of nature, humiliate, whatever he has to do, he's willing to do to protect and to satisfy his devotees. So we all want to relate to the third pastime, right? We want to think that, okay, no, I've accepted Krishna, and every once in a while I have a small trace of pride, and Krishna therefore disappears, and then I have to strive to find him, search after him. We all want to relate to that pastime. Now, we should all relate at least to the second pastime, where we are serving Krishna consistently, and sometimes we get a little bit distracted and lose sight of the goal, right? We should at least relate to this. But the sad reality is that most of us, me included, have more to learn from the first pastime, because we are unconsciously causing all sorts of problems, and we just consider that we're merely living our lives. I'm just being me, right? We don't even realize that we're causing all these different complications and troubles. In fact, we think that no one should stop us from doing so, right? No, the way I live my life is fine. And so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and people should leave me alone. This was Kalia's mentality. He was just being himself, Serpents are venomous, right? And so if the water's getting polluted and the birds are falling in and the cows that are drinking the water, what's that have to do with him? It's, he's just trying to live his life. So most of us have the most to learn from that particular pastime. Now we should hope to learn from the second one and one day strive to relate to the third one. But regardless, each of these pastimes provides hope for us, no matter what level we're on. Either there's hope because even though we're causing so many troubles, it's not so bad that we can't come back from it, and we can't become purified. We can't be relieved of our sinful tendencies from the mercy of Krishna's feet, right? That he can't drive those out of us if we sincerely beg for such things. And we should also be encouraged from Govardhan Leela that although we may be engaged in devotional service, if we become distracted, make some mistakes, forget the true goal, forget that, everything that we're doing is actually for Krishna, not becoming distracted by the results that come as a byproduct of bhakti, not thinking that we're the doer of those results, not thinking that we are the enjoyer of those results, etc. So there's something we can learn from all of this. And again, that any amount of distress is worth increasing this attachment to Krishna. So no matter what level we're on, we can learn something from all these pastimes. So at this point, before I go on, because then, as I mentioned, I want to talk about my favorite aspects of some of these pastimes, which is good. But before I do that, I wanted to see if there are any questions or comments on what we covered so far. And then if not, like I said, I'll gladly delve more into the details of these pastimes because they're very sweet. I don't see any hands. So it's fun to do this because when we're just mentioning briefly like this, these pastimes, then there's plenty of time to bring out all of our favorite aspects of them instead of focusing on specific parts, right? Now, both of these approaches are unfathomably valuable, but it's good to have an opportunity to share our favorite appreciations. Like, for example, sometimes when giving class, we know that there's a very specific verse coming up, and it's a super important verse that it just reveals the essence of the pastime, and it becomes tempting to just at least mention it, right? To mention what's going to happen in that verse so we can show, what all of this is building up to, what the moral of the story is, what the lesson to be learned is. And it's tempting to do that. But at the same time, we don't want to step on someone else's verse. We want to allow whoever has the great fortune of speaking on that, but we want to allow them to, speak on it without having to just repeat what everyone else has already been saying the whole time, right? Not that that's a bad thing. It's always good to repeat such things. But anyway, it can become tempting. But here in this circumstance, because we're just mentioning some of the pastimes, we can just go for it, right? Like, for example, Damodar, the month of Damodar is coming up, right? And so when we're reading the pastime, it's tempting when we're reading the pastime to go straight for the 2 fingers too short. The rope was always 2 fingers too short. And what those 2 fingers represent, the mercy and the endeavor, in order to conquer the Supreme Lord, in order to attain the mercy of the Supreme Lord, or attain the Supreme Lord, 2 things are necessary: the mercy of the Supreme Lord and our endeavor to take hold of the mercy of the Supreme Lord. And so when we're going through those verses, we kind of want to jump to that and really focus on that. So today we actually have an opportunity to do that. So with the Kaliya pastime, we see that even though so much damage was done, right? And we're not talking, disturbing of the peace or hurting people's feelings. We're talking death, of highly important people and creatures here. Even though so much damage was done, Krishna just easily reversed all of it, right? So there was a reason why all of these calamities were happening, right? Even though so many of Krishna's dear devotees and beloved cows were fatally poisoned by Kaliya, like they actually lost their life, all of that was reversed once the pastime ran its course, right? Again, this refers to the third pastime, the Rasa Lila, where any amount of sorrow or suffering is absolutely accepted if it increases our taste to serve Krishna, increases our attachment to Krishna, right? So the pastime happened for a reason, several reasons, actually. And in a similar way, the calamities that happen in our lives also happen for a reason, right? And there are tragic losses that accompany those calamities, but these losses are necessary for us to understand and appreciate uh, uh, the true goal. And here in the material world, although the suffering and the calamities feel very real, and in a sense they are, because we are experiencing them. But when we're identifying with the body, we accept it as the only reality. So when we lose something and it's gone forever, and we feel that it's gone forever, we feel this severed connection, right? But as we understand that we are not the body, that we're spirit soul, we start to understand that these calamities, they're not permanent. They're temporary in order to help us understand the big picture, right? The soul cannot be moistened by water, burned by fire, withered by the wind, cut by weapons, etc. And so there's actually no danger. We are going through some stuff, and it's real. We're really going through it. But there's no actual danger of severing this connection from Krishna, right? So there are several things that are happening in this pastime. It's not just about Kaliya and Krishna, right? It's about all the devotees present there. So again, in our lives, there are several factors at play, and we have to understand that. Oftentimes, because there are four different types of individuals who surrender to Krishna, those who are in distress, that's one of them, right? So that's what we'll talk about today. We tend to think, everybody in the material world tends to think, why me? Why does this have to happen to me? You know, why is this happening to me? Or what did I do to deserve this? Right? We think like that. If we're pious, then we turn to Krishna, and at least we're asking Krishna why this is happening to me, and to relieve us from the distress, even though we're going through the distress for a very good reason. All of the suffering that we go through in this material world is self-imposed. As we understand that, things start becoming clearer and clearer. So, since we are not in control, we have to let these things play out, right? Krishna always has our best interest in mind, even when we don't care to even acknowledge him. And this is the absolute truth. Even when we're trying to ignore him, he always has our best interest in mind. But it always goes better if we sincerely strive to grasp onto his mercy regardless of the obstacles, right? We learn this from each of those pastimes as well. If we stay focused on the Supreme Lord, if we have a little help from others, like Kaliya had help from his wives, then we can attain the mercy of the Supreme Lord, and all of the suffering that we went through just increases our relationship with Krishna. It helps us to understand what that relationship is and to appreciate it. So, as I mentioned, Krishna was willing to play with Kaliya for a while to allow him to think that he had the upper hand. Kaliya even bit Krishna on the chest as soon as, so Krishna went in the water and he's splashing around like an elephant, it says. And he's making all sorts of sounds on the water. And Kaliya was disturbed. So the first thing he did was he bit Krishna on the chest. So, and Krishna allowed that. Yeah, no problem. And then Krishna allowed him to wrap him up in his coils, right? And Kaliya was thinking, oh, yeah, see, now I've taught this whoever this is a lesson for disturbing my peace. Little did he know he was disturbing so many other things, right? But he's very self-centric, like most of us, right? That's why this is maybe the pastime that we have the most to learn from in our current situation. But when Krishna noticed that his dear devotees were losing their lives on the bank of the Yamuna, due to that burning fire of separation from their very reason of being, right? The jewel of Raj. Again, he's their prananath, their reason for their very life air. When he saw their intense torment, he knew that playtime was over and it was time to expel the sinful tendencies from the envious beast, right? Now, it's also noteworthy here to mention that there aren't many demons that Krishna fights that he doesn't kill. He didn't kill Kaliya. This is noteworthy. We tend to think that everything has to be gotten rid of completely. But there are some things that we just have to adjust, right? And that's a good thing for us because we've done some things that most would argue are worthy trespasses to have us completely, blinked out of existence, right? But there's always hope. We can get rid of these sinful tendencies by the mercy of Krishna, by the mercy of the devotees, by the practice of our sadhana, right? So the pastime shows that even though we have sinful tendencies that are causing devotees serious harm, we can be purified of them, right? So although it's difficult to imagine, wait a second before I keep going. Am I already over time? What time do we usually go to? No, I don't think I am. Sorry, I tend to go over. I didn't want to do that. Okay, but let's continue. So now that we talked about the overall pastime, I want to talk about the absolute sweetness of the fruit of that pastime, right? Because there was so much torment, right? The residents of Vrindavan, they're literally losing their lives. They're going through so much torture because they see Krishna in danger. They think that he's losing his life, so they're losing their life. But before we talk about the absolute sweetest fruit of this pastime, there are two other aspects of the pastime that I want to mention. So these are my three favorite aspects of this pastime. So one is that, as I mentioned before, Krishna doesn't kill Kaliya, but he purifies his sinful tendencies instead, right? That's the first one. The second one is that Kaliya actually, after this pastime, becomes revered from that moment on as the brother or peer to Garuda, right? Because he bears the mark of Krishna's feet on his hoods, and he carried Krishna as Krishna's dancing on him. So he's accepted as an equal to Garuda, who also carries the Lord from place to place, right? So this is also another interesting aspect of the pastime. And my absolute favorite aspect of this pastime is actually what happened after the pastime was concluded. After, as mentioned in today's verses, Krishna showed that the water was now safe and there's no longer any danger. And I mentioned this aspect several times before, but it's certainly worth repeating because it's so incredibly sweet. So once it was known that the waters were safe and that there's no longer any danger, all of the residents of Vrindavan that night, they refused to go home. The reason why they refused to go home is because that intense burning separation that they felt when they perceived that Krishna was being taken away from them permanently. It was so overwhelming, that fire of separation that they were all experiencing, that they couldn't possibly take their eyes off of Krishna. And so if everyone went home, that would mean that they're not looking at Krishna, and they couldn't tolerate that, not at that moment. At that moment, they needed to drink Krishna with their eyes. They could not tolerate any more separation They got to the point in their separation that they actually lost their lives and then they were revived. So they couldn't take another second of not seeing their reason for living. So every resident of Vrindavan slept on the bank of the Yamuna that night. Nobody went home. That's an amazing aspect of this. So the fact that so many things were going on, so much danger was there, so many bad omens were observed, so many of Vrindavan's residents, the pure devotees, actually lost their lives. All of that was to increase the desire of each of those pure devotees to increase the attachment, the affection, the love of Krishna to the point that they were unwilling to take their eyes off of him for a moment. And again, that refers back to, or not refers back to, we can refer back to the verse we covered 2 weeks ago, where Uddhava was saying that who could tolerate even a moment of separation once knowing Krishna's character, right? So this got the residents of Vrindavan, who were already thinking of Krishna at every moment, to think of him even more intensely, to deepen that love, right? So that's what that pastime did for the pure devotees. And then really quickly, my favorite aspects of Govardhan Leela is that Krishna was able to interact with all of the different types of devotees all at the same time. So usually sometimes he's dealing with a couple of the different ones. Sometimes he's only dealing with one type of devotee. But in this occasion, he was dealing with all of the different types of devotees all at once. They were all under his pastime umbrella, right? And so that's pretty rare. And I especially like that even though he's omnipotent, he can do everything all at once with no problem at all. He still, out of love, got nervous due to certain circumstances, right? Because he's dealing with all of the different devotees in different ways, and he's getting nervous that, oh, maybe someone will see that shouldn't be seeing something that's going on. That's it's happening subtly, but maybe someone's noticing. And the pastime umbrella started to tremble because he was nervous. The Supreme Lord, who can do everything all at once with no difficulty whatsoever, actually gets nervous out of pastime, out of love for his devotees, because he doesn't want to spoil anyone's relationship, right? And so that there was some trembling of the pastime umbrella. And there are so many aspects of Rasa Leela mentioned both in Srimad Bhagavatam and the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which illustrate the intense feelings of love in union and in separation, and how both are required actually to get the topmost sweetness. It's not just union. You need to have that separation to really intensify that topmost love. So I will stop here and see if there are any additions, or maybe some of you have different aspects of these pastimes that are your favorite that you want to talk about or mention. Anyone? Looks like not. That's okay too. I thank you all again for this opportunity to do this service. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Very sweet class.
Thank you.
I did have you have a second?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So I was looking the first purport that you read, the last sentence of it.
It's a great sentence.
Yeah, that the perfection of one's occupational duty, whether in the sphere of duty to oneself, one's community, or one's nation, is judged by the degree which the Lord is satisfied.
Yeah.
And
if the Lord's not satisfied, then all of our duties are useless. And this is what the Yagnik Brahmanas, this is their conclusion that they came to. They were doing so many duties that they were taught were the right thing. They're following the Vedas. They're doing all these things. But when it counted the most, they neglected to serve Krishna. And so they said, damn all of that, damn all of the training, damn all of that, because it didn't actually awaken what was necessary. So it's not that we neglect our duties or we damn them to hell, but we have to use them properly. Because the duties, if we perform them properly, whether they're to the self, society, or what's the third one?
Oneself,
Community or
one's nation.
nation, right? So all of these duties are designed to help us actually have proper consciousness to Krishna. But if we neglect to have that focus, then it all had been useless, right? So this is always the point. That's why Srila Prabhupada called this movement the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. We are trying to be conscious of Krishna at every moment, to understand that whatever we're doing has to be for him. It has to please him. And if it's not pleasing him, it's not worth doing. If we're only doing something to please ourselves, that's causing further bondage into the material world, right? And so we'll be here perpetually. But when we serve him with love and devotion, when we please him through our various duties, performing them in the proper way, as guided by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, then we become purified, and we no longer have attachment to the duties. We no longer want to enjoy or control our situations, if that makes sense. So that is the essence of the philosophy. I love how Srila Prabhupada included that purport in such a great way, that anything we do, no matter what it is, we should make sure that that is pleasing to Krishna. And if we just keep that one small thing in mind and try to apply that at every moment, then we will make some serious advancement. If we have the sincerity, the determination, the dedication, and the mercy of the devotees and Shastra and Krishna. What more did you want to say about that, John? I interrupted you, I think.
No, I'm glad that you shared that. The more I hear on this, the better. My mind went right to it took me to the Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, 13 through 20. And we've been studying these verses where Krishna explains that he starts explaining qualities. And he says, such devotees are very dear to me. And then he basically ends each verse with, such a devotee is very dear to me. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of times, sometimes we wonder, is Krishna satisfied with my actions? Am I acting out of false ego? And I'm believing that Krishna must be satisfied with this? Or am I acting in a way that Krishna is actually satisfied? And how to understand that. And in those verses, Krishna is actually saying such things are actually really please me. I'm sure there's other places as well where Krishna, explains what pleases him. I'm sure there's other ways to find out, be it pleasing the spiritual master, as well. Anyway, that was, those verses kind of popped into my mind when you were reading that purport.
Good. It's good when those things happen, and it's good when we share that, because we can see how, certain aspects will remind different devotees of different things. And when we are able to share those with one another, then we end up making more connections, and then we broaden our consciousness in Krishna. So that's very good. Thank you for showing that connection. It's all connected, and it all goes to that point. Always remember Krishna, never forget him. That's what the Padma Purana says. Everything that's in the scripture is aimed toward that, right? And if your conclusion of the scripture is anything but that, then you have not actually understood the scripture, right? So it always comes down to always remember Krishna, never forget him. And then, of course, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took it another step because, we can say always remember Krishna and never forget him, but we don't know actually what that means. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pointed out, well, it's also pointed out in other shastras, but he made it very clear that the way we can understand scripture is through Sambandha, Abhidaya, and Prayojana, understanding the relationship between us and Krishna, understanding what the ultimate goal is, right? And then the actions that we can take in order to achieve that goal. Now, if we see the Shastra in that way, then we will make rapid progress. And if we actually follow it, we'll make rapid progress. When we use the Shastra to justify what we already decided we wanted to do, then we're not actually reading Shastra. We don't understand what the relationship is. The relationship is that we're minute, and that the Shastra, which is not different from Krishna, is infinite. And if we approach it in the right mood, we can understand, we can actually see how all contradictions are resolved. So if we have a particular stance on a particular issue, and we're trying to utilize quotes from Shastra to justify our one-sided opinion, and neglect the other side, thinking, well, that must be a misunderstanding, or someone translated it wrong or something like that. If that's our mentality, we don't understand Shastra. If we approach it properly and we acknowledge both of these seemingly contradicting terms, we will eventually see through service to the Shastra how both of them coexist. Then they're not actually contradictory at all, right? We were the ones that were seeing contradictions. So all contradictions are resolved in Krishna. Like Krishna is omnipotent, right? He could do everything all at once without even putting forth any effort. Yet he got nervous and the hill was shaking on his finger, right? So one could say, well, then he's not omnipotent, because if he were really the Supreme Lord, everything would just, no, but that's robotic. If everything's just going, like this, that's not love. That's not ras, to show the rasa, then these things happen, right? And so one might say, well, no, that's a contradiction. And it's not a contradiction. It shows something much more valuable than so-called logic or rules or, things like that. And eventually we do get to throw out the rules, right? We try to do it prematurely. We're here in the material world. We want to throw out all the rules, right? Throw out all the rules of sadhana bhakti. We're just going to engage in Krishna's service, right? But we're not on that platform yet, right? We haven't come close to that rung, and we're trying to throw away the whole ladder, right? That's not our process. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, all of the previous acharyas show us that the way to get to that point is to follow the process. And then once you get to that point, it is important to actually leave the process behind, right? So we do eventually let it go, just, not before we've actually gotten to the point where it's meant to take us. So did I go on a tangent? I'm sorry.
No, I loved it.
Okay.
Hopefully all the other devotees were appreciating it as well on the call. But I really did appreciate the explanation.
Thank you. And Sita Devi, I saw that you were unmuted again. I'm sorry, I always keep talking when you want to talk, but is there something that you wanted to add, please?
No, you actually answered. So
Thank you for humoring me.
Thanks.
I don't know if that just keeps actually happening or if you just are being nice about it.
it's happening a lot
Oh,
lately.
good. Well, Krishna tends to do that.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So
Thank
I
you.
guess we can stop here. Thank you all again. This is one of my favorite services. I'm very fortunate to still have it. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Very nice class.
Hare Krishna.
Lot of answers, lot of questions. Thank you very much.
I also like Prabhuji that when you said that we can, when people worship demigods, it's fine because they are accepting from higher authority. And so, so I think that I also do that. Everything I have been doing that from my childhood. So, but ultimately, if we do direct service to Krishna, then also good.
Yeah, they're devotees and they should be respected,
Yeah.
right? So we see them as devotees and we give them respect. That's good. Some neophyte devotees, they hear that the offenses to the holy name is worshiping the demigods independent to Krishna, and so they just say, demigod worshippers are demons, like that, because it's bad instead of, and that's not the case. They're as long as they're going in the right direction, that's good. So sometimes devotees, newer aspiring devotees, tend to kind of be mean to the devatas, to the demigods, especially when you hear these stories like Indra making mistakes and Brahma making mistakes. But no, these are actually highly elevated devotees, so we should give them respect. So we give them the respect as devotees of the Lord. And hopefully we learn from some of their mistakes, and we thank them because under normal circumstances, they wouldn't commit these mistakes. They're devotees, right? They do that so that we can learn from their mistakes. So we don't necessarily have to commit them. I mean, we're committing them anyway, even worse than they are. But hopefully we can, learn from their mistakes and take hope that even when we do make a mistake, that there's still hope for us, right? And what the process is to be able to grab on to Krishna's mercy, what endeavor that we have to put forth with a detachment to grab onto Krishna's mercy. So all of that is very important.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Okay.
Manchakalpatarabhishcha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namo.